It's a fact. Most Americans have credit card debt, and it is especially concentrated among younger folks, Gen Z, millennials, and Gen X. Learning how to get out of credit card debt can be incredibly challenging and frustrating, especially if you are finding yourself slipping into some common credit card traps. I'm Lindsay. I'm a certified financial therapist, licensed social worker, author of the book, The Financial Anxiety Solution, and founder of the financial wellness business, Mind, Money, Balance. I help people understand the emotional and psychological side of money so they can make wise financial decisions that work for them. And that includes sharing some of the basics about personal finance so you can have the information and knowledge you need to make your money work for you. Today, I'm going to highlight some traps that prevent people from getting out of credit card debt. And don't worry, I'm not just going to spend time talking about the trap. I'm also going to give you some actionable tips as you work on getting out of credit card debt. As I mentioned earlier, most Americans have credit card debt. And the way that this breaks down across generations is that 57% of Gen Xers, 52% of millennials, and 48% of Gen Z currently carry a balance on their credit cards. Credit cards make overspending really easy and often lead to debt. Even with good intentions of paying your balance in full and on time, it can be a challenge. Add on top of that, incredibly high interest rates, identity theft, conflicting information about personal finance and credit cards, and it becomes really intense. Plus, companies spend a lot of money on aggressive marketing to sell their products and services, making it even harder to curb spending. Allow me to introduce you to the first trap that I see people get caught up in when they have credit card debt. The first trap is spending money that you don't have. It might sound straightforward, but a lot of us find ourselves using credit cards to float. And I'll raise my hand as this being an issue that I fell into back when I was living paycheck to paycheck in my first social work job. And the way that this looks is you kind of play this game where you put charges on a credit card and know that you'll have the money in your checking account in theory by the time the bill comes due. But in the meantime, you're kind of floating on that credit card debt or on that line of credit to make sure that you make ends meet. So the way that this might look is that you put something like groceries on a credit card, knowing that you get paid the next week. In that week between putting that charge on the credit card and getting paid, you're in a really precarious situation because in theory, you'll be able to pay the credit card in full and on time. But if anything happens, you're in a really challenging situation. So being really mindful that if you are going to use credit cards, and to be clear, I am not anti-credit card, I am pro credit card usage and responsible credit card usage. Be really mindful of the ways that you find yourself spending more money than you actually have. Another trap is impulsive spending. If you find yourself falling into impulsive spending, again, that happens, it's normal, but instead of saying, oh, I'm just not going to impulse spend, take a look at how much money you've spent on your credit cards over the past few months on these so-called impulse purchases. From there, you can get a good idea of about how much you're spending. And then I want you to check how much money you actually have coming in and whether or not you can continue to enjoy that amount of impulse purchasing. If the answer is yes, then you probably wouldn't be watching or listening to this. But if the answer is, ooh, I didn't realize I was spending quite so much money on impulse spending, then give yourself permission to set aside a little bit of money every single month or every single paycheck that you use just for impulse spending. I literally will go to the ATM at the beginning of the month and give myself some fun money, and then I'm allowed to impulse spend that money however I want. And once that money's gone, it's gone. So give yourself ways to work with the way that you engage with money instead of trying to create something that's really complicated and you can't stick to. The second trap is not paying your balance in full and carrying a balance. I mentioned this in the credit card myths video, but about 45% of Americans who have credit cards carry a balance on them month to month. Not only does this negatively impact your credit score, but it also means that you're literally spending more money for those goods or services that you put on the credit card because now you are paying an interest rate on them. A great thought exercise that I invite people to do is to Google credit card interest rate calculator and see how much it is costing you to not pay off your card in full and on time. And when I say how much it's costing you, these calculators are great because you say, here's my balance, here's how much I'm currently paying, here's the interest rate that I pay, and it will show you how many hundreds or sometimes thousands of dollars you are paying on top of the initial purchase price because you are spending money in interest. So that's one thing to do, is just to get your head around how much money you're actually spending on interest. And the other thing to do is to be really mindful of when you are going in to purchase something, especially a large purchase, and making sure that you have the cash on hand in your checking account to cover it. I'm all for people using their credit cards responsibly, and as long as you have the cash in the bank to cover it, I have no problem with you swiping a large purchase on a credit card, knowing that you can pay it off in full and on time. And the third trap is falling for scams. A few months ago, I was interviewed on CNN regarding a story about a personal finance columnist who found themselves falling victim to being scammed out of $50,000. I will link it in the description below if you have not seen it and want to see it. In that interview, what I shared was some common things that we see among these scams, and also how they dysregulate our nervous system to make us make decisions that we probably wouldn't make if we were feeling calm, if we were feeling grounded. A few general rules of thumb to help you avoid financial scams, especially regarding credit card usage, is to not share your personal or banking information over the phone. Your bank, your credit union, your credit cards are never going to call you and ask for you to confirm your social security number or to confirm some sort of security question, such as what your mother's maiden last name is. So being mindful that they won't reach out to you, and that's already a red flag. Also being mindful of not checking or logging into banking apps or credit card apps when you are on shared Wi-Fi, such as at a library or a cafe. If you have to access your accounts in public, you might want to consider using a VPN just to give yourself a little bit more security. If you get a weird call, a weird text, or a weird email, pay attention to that weird feeling. If you are getting a sense in your gut that something is amiss, listen to it and then check in on whether or not that is an active scam. Scams are changing all the time, so I highly encourage you to type in what is happening plus the word scam into an internet browser and see what populates. For example, if you type in something like UPS or USPS text scam, you will see that there is a common scam going around where people pretend to be USPS or UPS and say that you need to pay them in order to have your package delivered. Other common ones happen when you are selling or buying things online, with people saying things like, oh, I'll overpay you if you just pay me in this particular method. Any of those things that don't really pass the gut check or the sniff test are worth typing into a browser and just seeing whether or not it's a scam. If you're not sure, the Federal Trade Commission, also known as the FTC, has a great guide to help you avoid impersonation scams. They specifically talk about how to avoid a government impersonation scam, but these can really cross the board with not only government officials, but also bank or credit card impersonators who are trying to call and get your personal information. If you find yourself in a scenario like this, document everything. Contact local law enforcement. You can call the non-emergency number to help you file a police report and share what happened to you. And if you have experienced it, give yourself some compassion and extend to yourself some forgiveness, because these things are happening so quickly and they are changing all the time. But being really mindful about these types of traps that might contribute to making it hard to get out of credit card debt. When it comes to how to repay your debt, that is personal and it is up to you. I shared earlier that I was more in the position of using credit cards to float me in between paychecks. And even though I didn't technically carry credit card debt or a credit card balance, being in that paycheck to paycheck situation meant that if one little thing went awry, I was going to be in a really bad financial situation. Nowadays, I do not play the credit card float game. I only put things on my credit card that I know that I have the money in my checking account to be able to pay for in full. So if that's you, know that it happened and work on different ways to find ways through using your credit cards to help float you. And truthfully, the best thing I did to help me move out of that paycheck to paycheck situation and using credit cards to float, it wasn't trimming my spending. I'll share a couple of cost-cutting measures that did help, but really what helped to move the needle was for me to apply for and land a better, higher paying job. Having that additional income meant that I could stop playing that credit card game and could actually pay for everything in full and on time. A couple of things that I did though to help reduce costs or to allow myself to engage in entertainment while I was in that paycheck to paycheck situation. I did things like secret shopping. I would do a lot of meal prep and meal planning, and I would eat kind of a similar routine of food just so I knew how much it would cost and I wouldn't get caught up in that decision fatigue of not knowing what to eat. And in fact, I have an entire video of how you can save money on food if you don't identify as a cook that you can watch after this. So again, the 3 traps I want you to avoid are spending money on credit cards that you don't have, paying the minimum instead of paying the entire statement balance, and falling for frauds or scams. If you haven't watched my last video, I talk about common credit card myths and help bust them to give you a little bit more information about how you can maintain a good credit score and things to do that will help you have good credit when we think about the credit card aspect of things. And if you are struggling with your credit card usage, learning more about your money archetype can be incredibly helpful. Take my free quiz at mindmoneybalance.com/quiz to get insights to your unique financial strengths and challenges. See you next time.